In this interview, I chat with Taylor Harris, the author of This Boy We Made, a memoir of motherhood, genetics, and facing the unknown. The debut memoir explores her experience raising a young son who is suffering from listlessness, processing delays, and other troubling symptoms. It follows her journey navigating her own emotional terrain, the education system, and the medical establishment in pursuit of answers for her child. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. I wanted to chat with you about your book, This Boy We Made. What a gorgeous cover is this. Tell me a little bit about the cover art and what you think that it says about the content of the book.
The cover is one of my favorite things, and I feel like I get to brag on it without sounding some kind of way because I didn't have a lot to do with it. So Nicole is the artist of the cover, and I had sent her, you can see, there's the silhouette of my son. And so I sent her a picture of him. He used to love even when he was 2 and 3, he would jump off these picnic tables, and I'd always be like, can a kid break their shin? I don't know if this is okay. But he loved it so much that I let him do it. So I sent her a picture of him doing that. But she came up with a lot of it as far as the sort of the colors. They almost have this tunnel effect, which I love. And I love that he sparkles. And that was one of the things I showed him an arc early on. And he was like, "Ooh, I'm sparkly."
Wonderful. I didn't realize that was an actual silhouette of your son. I assumed it was just an imaginary boy kind of leaping out into the world. So it does definitely have special significance that it's your actual son. So in the book, you call him Toast. Am I pronouncing it correctly?
Yeah, you got it right. And he would be so happy. He's so kind, but he gets toast, like French toast. Or some people, they listen for it and they're like, "Oh, Toes? Why is your nickname Toes?" But yes, Toast it is.
Fantastic. And so tell us a bit about him. He's obviously a central, I don't want to say character, but a central, since he's a real boy, but a central figure in the book. If you were introducing him to someone who's thinking about picking up the book, what would you say about him?
Again, something I can say because I didn't make it up. Former teacher of his, we were texting one day recently, and she was like, "You know what? Toast is the best of all of us." And I thought that was just really sweet, and also just hits on this, when he said, "I'm sparkly," there's something about him that even if I wasn't sure I could always get through to him or understand him because his speech was delayed early on. But what you get is this sort of vibrancy from him. And he really takes it on and handles it and wants to know, what condition do I have? Because we do have some smaller diagnoses for him, just not a global one. And he wants to know sort of, how do I spell it? Can I research it on my Chromebook? And so that's been really neat to see. As he gets older, we can have those conversations.
So for folks who haven't read the book yet, can you explain sort of how he figures? You mentioned some of the small diagnoses, but I would say the book, much of it is a journey trying to understand him better and understand sort of these symptoms that he's experiencing over time, starting when he was about 22 months.
You can go back to his birth and everything was sort of okay. But at 22 months, I feel like his body was just made us notice.
At what point did you start writing about it? Of course, at the beginning, you didn't think of it as a book. Was it journaling? Was it just taking notes about observations? So how did the writing part begin?
The funny thing is, almost before the 22 months sort of crash, I had a column for McSweeney's called Big Mom on Campus that was mostly humorous. There were some more serious columns that I wrote, but most of it was just sort of making fun and light of motherhood and these ridiculous challenges we face, when our baby has a blowout in the car and things like that. I had some experience writing about motherhood, but again, a lot of funny things, or I'd write a little bit about anxiety and motherhood and how I think I saw some of my anxiety in my firstborn daughter. But then with Toast, and sort of the seriousness of the story, it did sort of start with some journaling. And then I just had help from other writers and editors and other mom friends who were like, "Hey, we don't want to pressure you, but would you be open to writing about some of your experiences?"
That's beautiful. As you're experiencing it, once you get into the point where it's a book, you're actively working on a book and you're revisiting reports from doctor's appointments or journal entries or your own memories. How do you then determine, since it's a real story unfolding in your own life, how do you know when it's the end?
That is the question. something that came up quite a bit during the process was like, how does this story end? And something I kind of joke about now. The book went out to some people who work in like other forms of media, like, you know, if they wanted to make it into a movie or a series or something. And one of the notes back was like, the story is so beautiful. Like, let us know if you get a diagnosis. I was like, well, I sort of feel good about that because it's not like a comment on my writing. Like, I actually can't just give you a diagnosis, but also it was sort of like, yes, I would like to be the first to know if
right.
there's a diagnosis.
You're like, no one wants a diagnosis.
But the reader, I always say, like, the reader, if the reader's going to invest, like, they deserve some movement, some shift, some change, some coming back to. And so I think of This Boy We Made. Yes, there's shift, there's movement, there's narrative, tension, but also it's kind of circling around these similar questions. And I think it's inviting the reader to consider them with me. And so do I end up with more knowledge at the end of the book? For sure. Different perspective, for sure. But there are some things that hold true, I think, throughout the book about a mother and her son. And I think for me, that was important to come back to, like, you know what, even when you don't have all the answers, there are these truths, and they've been true forever. And I was okay with that sort of being part of the ending of the book.
In the book, you write about entering a lot of different medical settings, and there's a certain vulnerability when you're arriving with your son and you know there's an issue. The issue doesn't have a name, but you write movingly about how you feel about being perceived or judged by people in different settings. Can you talk about that a bit, just as a Black mom entering spaces where your child is being assessed?
We all know certain things, right? I shouldn't say we all, but I think there are things we should all know, like the mortality rate of Black women giving birth, or, you know, sort of the review that came out of med schools where people legitimately still believe Black people feel less pain and things like that. And so when I walked into these offices, especially if it was a doctor who was filling in, he has some great regular doctors who I'm not talking about here. One of the scenes is the doctor filling in saying sort of like, wait, you know, you gave your daughter Tylenol when? Like, how bad was her fever? And I say something like, I don't know, 101, 102, something not terrible, but I'm like a pretty new mom, you know, and he's like, we don't give Tylenol for fevers like that. And where did you say you live again? And like, this is Charlottesville. So I'm like, why does that matter? And sometimes it can be because I'm like, you know, am I treated a way because I'm a stay-at-home mom? Am I treated a certain way because I'm a woman, a Black woman, because I look young? And it's hard to know, right? And so it's almost that burden of proof, I think, that we carry. For me, a lot of what I wanted, I think, the reader to feel was that burden and that questioning. Like, yes, some of it is my own sort of the way anxiety works in my body and my mind. And I can spiral and think about a question and ruminate. The other part is these sort of outside forces acting on you and knowing the history, even of Charlottesville, and how Black people tend to be treated in hospitals. And that includes in Charlottesville for sure. So there were rarely easy answers to that, 100%. Like, I knew certainly I was being treated differently because of race, but you still can't ignore it, even if I'm not 100% sure.
I wanted to end kind of where we started by talking about this leaping, sparkling boy on the cover of your book. What have you told him about the book and about the stories within it? And what does he feel about it?
The question is, what has he told other people about? I took him to CHOP recently because now we're in Pennsylvania. So Philly is a little bit closer and we'd been there years ago. So we just kind of went and kind of get reevaluated, see if there's anything new out there. And we met this great Black woman who was like a geneticist, and she was talking to us. She focuses on issues of metabolism, and he's just trying to get to the bottom. You know, we're explaining, how old is he now? 9. So we're explaining like at least 7 years probably of test results and things to her. And she's asking these serious pointed questions. And he interrupts her and he's like, so have you heard of This Boy We Made? It comes out at that point, my publication date was January 4th. So he's like, comes out January 4th. You can order it. You know, she's so kind. Again, this is why having a Black doctor can make a difference. You know, she almost feels a little bit like family, and she just like really boosts him. And she's like, that is great. And then she goes back to asking me questions and interrupts her again. And he's referring to me and he's like, you know, you're talking to someone famous, right? I'm like, oh. But he's just so proud, and he's so about, I do a lot of worrying. Toph's worries some, not so much about himself, I think, but he just got this like sixth sense about life. Like he's got this other core or layer to him. And then I think in the book I mentioned, that's why I think some people would ask me, like, is he some like locust eating prophet? Like he's this like really interesting guy. He's really bubbly. He really knows what he wants in life. And right now that is a Lego skate park set. And when he wants something, he tells you over and over again. And that's also sort of how you get to know Tophs, is like, what is Tophs obsessing about right now? That's one of the ways in.
Well, you've written a beautiful tribute to him and to your relationship and just to the journey of navigating motherhood and all that goes into that with more than one child, actually. But since it's called This Boy We Made, we focused on him today. But a beautiful book. And I know many people will benefit from just your candor and vulnerability and willingness to share all these different dimensions of your experience as a mom and as a writer and just as a human navigating life. So thank you.
Thanks so much. And thanks for reading it.